Okay, so there's a game that I've spent a lot of time in that I've talked about before. It's a little game called Valheim. Now, I've never gotten Tom to play it. Coltrane, we never played together, but I know you've played it because you've played every game in the history of mankind.
Correct.
So,
that is
but
correct.
My cousin Big Rob here, he has spent more time in this game than any of us. But the reason I bring it up is this game Enshrouded is coming out. It's got a lot of hype. Tom Coltrane, I know you're not super familiar with it yet.
I've seen some stuff. It's out there. I'm familiar.
But it is coming out at the end of this month. And the reason I'm excited is because as a big fan of Valheim, it's expanding on Valheim. It's taking what Valheim created and made endearing and engaging, and it's building on that. So I had a lot of fun in Valheim. It's just a great co-op game to sit back, shoot the shit, have a good time, and just zen out in a game world. But it's building on that, and I wanted to bring Rob in to tell us a little about it. And for those who are familiar, maybe you'll learn a little something. For those that aren't, let's see what we got. Rob, give me the lowdown, the dirty,
Woo. So
the giggity goo.
I have been watching a lot of videos. I didn't get a lot of time to play the demo myself because they did have a period of time where you're able to play the demo. I got in for maybe like an hour of play, but I've been watching a lot of other people who played it, and I've been kind of mulling over the similarities and the differences. As far as the similarities, and actually I was shocked to find that there's a lot more differences than you'd see on the surface. But for the similarities, in Valheim, you can pretty much terraform the map however you want. There's almost no limit. In this game, very similar. You can kind of terraform wherever you want and kind of mold the map to how you want it. Unlike most survival games where you have to eat and drink to survive, this is just you eat and drink to buff yourself. Very similar to Valheim as well.
Love that.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, thank God. I'm so happy to hear that.
I think a big part of these survival games, and at least as they start to evolve more into this MMO-ish type genre, is that you want it survival enough to where you still get the feel of that, but you don't want it to a point where it's so damn tedious that you're like, oh, I gotta drink water, get it back up to this range, eat a mushroom for this. Like, it's just enough, right?
Like dying of starvation is just not fun.
It's not. No.
At all. No.
I mean,
like, that's how it is for me in art.
It
drives me crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, you're never going to die of starvation, so just calm down over there. I see the Chick-fil-A cup.
That is true.
Yeah.
And then another similarity that I found was some of the combat system is very similar. There are dodges, there are blocks, there are parries. When you parry, you stun the enemy. The only difference here is you have like an execution move that you can, depending on your weapon, will hit a massive hit on the guy. Whereas Valheim, you can get a bigger hit on them, but you don't have the fancy execution move. And same thing for sneaking up and stun attacks. So in Valheim, you can sneak up and you'll get a bigger hit on the guy. But in this game, there's a separate like sneak up attack that's kind of like an execution as well.
Well, that's what I talk about building off Valheim is like,
it's awesome.
The Valheim in combat and its combat was passable.
Very basic.
It was basic. It was fun, but I wanted more. I was left wanting more in that game.
I have to ask a quick question. Can the trees kill you in Enshrouded when you chop them? Can they fall down and murder you and your friend?
As far as I've seen, no.
All right. Okay. That could go either way. Some people love that. Some people hate that.
The different, another different that I found in combat is there's a lock-on feature, which if you've played any games like Breath of the Wild, there's an old game that I used to play many years ago in the early 2000s called Dark Cloud for the PS2.
Oh, man,
it has a lock-on third-person combat where you can still do all the dodging, but you're always centered on the enemy, and you can hit the same button to switch between the different enemies. So that is also different from Valheim.
So more tab target, it sounds like, almost in a way. instead
Yeah,
of like a action
it
combat style.
it's action combat, but you tab through your enemies, the ones that you're fighting.
Well, and just
I
like you were
like it.
saying too about building off of Valheim, Valheim's combat, though basic, I thought was actually it worked. I thought it was actually
It
good.
did.
But hearing this execution moves, being able to lock on,
Mm-hmm.
like this sounds fantastic. Like it's that next level. You know
Yep.
what I
Well,
mean?
there's actually classes too, and that's the cool part of it.
Yes.
Is you can it has more of an RPG element than Valheim had. So there is basic classes, and then there are very basic skill trees that you can also go down.
Yep.
So it does have more nuance than just leveling up a weapon, for instance.
Yeah. So if you remember Valheim, your experience and your character building is based on the things you're doing.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a set experience, and when you hit that experience level, you can then add another skill to your tree.
Yes.
And
It's
you'll
awesome.
actually see the circular tree, and you'll see mages up here, archers up here, warriors and you can kind of build out your character and kind of
Yeah.
maybe even tween in between the classes and kind of get what you want out of maybe between two classes.
Now, the
It's awesome.
biggest thing that is getting me more hyped than something like Valheim is, although it was a big world, like, and there were biomes, right?
Mhm.
It was still the same. Like, sure, they were shaped different. The mountain was more pointy on this one. There was more tree. Like, it was different, and at first you could feel it when you went into the different biomes, and it was cool. But then you quickly realized that it's just more of the same thing. Like, there's not a lot of depth to it. Can you tell me more about the world and how it's different and more immersive?
So, as far as I've seen from the demos, I've only seen two biomes so far. There's looks like there was a desert and then a meadow type of thing, but then the like I don't want to say like the intangible here is there's the shroud, which is like a poison gas that has kind of taken over the lower part of the world. And when you go into the shroud, you have a time limit where if you don't make it out in time, you die.
Hmm.
Ooh.
So I'm guessing though there's got to be some kind of risk reward, right, for going into the shroud. What do you get for going in?
So
Yeah.
all of the bosses in this world are inside the shroud.
Hmm.
And all of the bigger, stronger enemies are down inside the shrouds. And so when you beat these enemies and these bosses, that's when you get the rewards. And in fact, when you beat the bosses, they're then underneath them or behind them. There's this like shroud root, and when you chop that down, you disperse the shroud, and then you have access to that whole area.
That sounds like a cool gameplay loop, actually.
I mean,
Okay.
talk about risk versus reward. Not only do you have to deal with the bosses and whatever mobs, but as you're entered the shroud, you're dying.
Yep.
You've started the timer.
Yep.
So there's
Mhm.
that like urgency, on top of everything else, which just adds
Hmm.
to the drama of it, I think.
I think it adds to the strategy too, because you don't want to just look around and be in the shroud for 3 minutes and then you see the boss. Well, maybe you want to go out, reset your time so you know where the boss is. Then you can go back in and give yourself more time to defeat him.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And even during that boss fight itself, you'll see that timer and you'll know,
Yep.
oh my gosh, like I'm 45 seconds. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But the boss is at 10% health. Like that's going to add that other layer. Oh,
Yeah.
that's exciting, man. That's
So
cool.
my favorite part that I've seen so far, and maybe you can tell me more, Rob, is that number one, I like the gear. I'm a sucker for aesthetics. We all
Hmm.
know this. I want to look cool while I do cool shit, right? Like
Hmm.
that's just my jam. Um, but the other aside from that, what Valheim very much lacked was the traversal. You only really had a boat. That was your
Yeah.
means of traversing, or improve your jump, and you can jump really high. But that's it. And Enshrouded, you can fly, sorta. You got like little wingsuits. You
Yep.
have grapple hooks.
Hmm.
It has that more inertia that we often talk about that we like, and there's just different means to travel.
Yep.
Like to climb up a mountain, jump off on a wingsuit, and get ready to go. That's
Not
fun,
That's
which
awesome.
is sweet. Just another cool thing to add.
This game is a little bit less or more forgiving than Valheim as far as that goes, because once you beat a boss, wherever you are in the world, you could always recall to your house.
Okay.
Hmm.
So the traversal is only one way. It's the brutal way of getting there, but once you're done, out.
None of that
That's
pesky
awesome.
portal crap. Where you
No,
can't
no
carry stuff
portals.
through it.
And in fact, I think right before each boss, there are waypoints that actually will save your place. So if you die, you don't have to respawn all the way back to your house. You respawn at the waypoint right at the boss.
Okay.
This is sounding like my kind of survival game. I don't have to eat food. I don't have to drink water. I got
Well,
fast
you do,
travel.
but it's just
If you want to take on a
know what I
boss,
mean.
you gotta eat something.
Okay,
which
well, let me
is
If you're just
which-
going out to chop wood, you don't need to eat nothing. But if you're
Right,
going out to
that's
fight a
cool.
boss, you gotta be ready.
Okay, let me
Yeah.
ask the classic question that is there a corpse run? When you die in this game, like in Valheim, you drop all your items. You get your little backpack, you know what I mean, that you then have to trek naked,
Yep.
right? And into the mob, into the area where it was super difficult, and then you already died once. Now you got to go in like pretty much naked
I'm
and get your
getting
items
some
back.
death sketo trauma coming
Yes,
back.
exactly.
Oh my
and
gosh.
then book it out, right? We've all been there. Like no one
Yeah.
enjoys this mechanic. No one. So is Enshrouded? Are there corpse runs in Enshrouded? What happens when you die?
There indeed are corpse runs. The only thing that they've made better is that obviously there are waypoints throughout the world where you can make your spawn point. So you're never as far away
Right.
from where your corpse is than you would be in, say, a game like Valheim, where it's
So
your spawn point is your
some
house.
quality of life being
Mhm.
thrown in there.
Like they clearly want this game to be played by multiple people at a time.
Yeah, that was my next
Okay.
question because I don't usually engage in a lot of the survival. Well, a lot of them are single player survival or very tight, like co-op groups, right? Like you have a couple people. How
Yeah.
many players can be in the world? And are you with other players? Like, is this massively multiplayer or is it just like you have a group that jumps on your server? How does that work?
As far as I can tell, it's not massively multiplayer unless they're going to be unless you go on to like a pay server. If you have your own dedicated server, the max cap for users is 16, which isn't too terrible.
No.
It's already hard enough getting 4 people together. So
Yeah,
if you can get 16 people together, man, you're having a party.
And Rob will run a dedicated server 24/7.
Yep, I'm
He
planning
sets it
to.
up.
I'm going to be dismantling my Valheim server and replacing it with an Enshrouded server.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's
And the
awesome.
last piece of the puzzle here that Valheim did very well was its crafting and building.
Mm-hmm.
And Enshrouded does have this from a lot of the footage from the screenshots. The buildings look great. The farming looks awesome. I don't know too many details about that, but let's go ahead and talk about the crafting and the building.
One of the things that they did here to even make the game a little less lonely, whereas Valheim you had a crafting station, in this game you're rescuing NPCs and they do your crafting.
So how
And they will actually talk to you.
This reminds me a little bit of Conan Exiles. There's something kind of similar with Conan Exiles with that. Interesting. Okay, and then you said they'll talk to you, so like
Yep.
there's some interaction.
So you literally will rescue them by beating dungeons. You will resurrect them in your house back at your base, and you go up to them and do your certain crafted. So I believe the first person you rescue is a blacksmith. Then later
awesome.
there's like an alchemist, and then there's like it keeps going on and on and on.
I guess it won't be as
like that.
as much like Valheim where you yourself do the crafting. You'll almost bring materials to them and
Yep.
then
And a
okay.
cool thing that they do that I saw in New World is when you look at a recipe of something that they can craft, you can pin it. It'll show up on your screen, and then you know exactly how much of what you need to go out and gather to build what you
cool.
want.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about building homes and like bases. Is it totally freeform? Like you can just build anywhere, or is there certain areas that you're gonna have to build?
So it's not as completely free as Valheim is. In this game, you basically build a flame altar, and you can only have one per world, and everything has to be built around that flame altar. You can dismantle it and move it anytime you want. And in fact, if you say you have like an entire village and you want to move the whole village, if you dismantle the flame altar, it'll give you schematics for everything that you've built. You can then move it to where you want and rebuild everything very quickly.
Oh,
Literally just plop stuff down.
Okay.
that's crazy. So you don't
So
have to start from scratch.
No, it's a couple of clicks and you got the blueprint, you move it to where you want, and then you put everything down where you want. as an entire structure.
So the game is more focused on the actual being out in the world and playing and fighting and just maintaining your homestead instead of constantly building.
And one other thing that this kind of improved on Valheim is where you were told what to do kind of through riddles by the Hugin the bird.
Yeah.
Whereas this, you have a journal, you have written out quests, you have quest givers, you have the waypoints will show up on your map of where you want to go. Even if it's inside an area where you haven't seen before, you'll see the waypoint of where you need to go to do the thing you need to do. Whereas Valheim, it was like, figure it out.
Yeah. Which had its own special appeal, but it's this transition, guys.
Yep.
That blend is coming.
Well, like I said, I've never got into survival, but this sounds pretty good. A lot of quality of life, but I might just wait till Enshrouded 3, and then it'll just be a game instead of a survival game. We'll have enough quality of life. I don't know.
You got to try the survivals, Tom. They're so much fun. They're so immersive. You're like in the world.
If we get a big server, I'm on it. I'll check it out.
It's just the zen of just being in it, and it's very low stress.
Yes.
And it's just fun to get together, have a few beers, talk about whatever, and just play. Like, you don't have to worry about raid mechanics or listening to Coltrane's recording in DBM. Like,
you
just get out and do stuff.
Yeah, you don't have to hear any of that.
That turns me on. Stop.
3, 2, 1. Yes. You don't want to hear any of that. Right. You don't want to hear any of that.